Hi, it's Mark Bossert, producer of the Pawlik Automotive podcast, and we're here with Mr. Bernie Pawlik, Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver, Vancouver's best auto service experience, and 19-time winners of Best Auto Repair in Vancouver, as voted by their customers. And we're talking cars. How are you doing this morning, Bernie?
Doing very well.
So we actually have a little bit of snow here in Vancouver, which has freaked everybody right out, and that's a hit and miss affair. We don't always get snow. You have a bit of a tip for us around windshield wipers.
I do. Yeah, so here's a little preventative tip to prevent more serious damage like windshield wiper motor, wrecking your wiper motor, your wiper arms and linkage, or on the cheap side, the wiper blades. But it just occurred to me, as Mark said, we don't get winter here very often, so we tend to be a little lackadaisical with our operating of our cars, at least some of us. I know I have a few people in my family, my wife, my kids, even myself. Sometimes we tend to drive home and just leave the windshield wipers on because it'll probably be raining the next day, or we just kind of forget and don't really think of the fact that perhaps it's going to freeze overnight, or there's going to be 3 inches of snow in the window. And when you go to start your car, the wipers already switched on, and your windshield wipers could be frozen to your windshield or trying to move 3 or 4 inches of wet snow, which is really hard on them. So my tip is make sure you shut your wipers off, and that includes front and rear. When you shut your car off at night, or whenever you actually park your car, you should make sure your wipers are off. It's easy to forget about it in this climate because we don't have to deal with it very often. But I'm sure there's some people watching this podcast going, well, duh, I do that already, because a lot of people are smarter in winter than we are around Vancouver and areas like this. But just a tip, if you're not in the habit of doing it, save yourself some money. So I'll just share a couple of photos. There's basically what we're looking at is a windshield, and these are some wiper blades buried underneath. Again, like I'm saying, you don't know whether these are frozen to the window or whether you're about to be moving a bunch of snow. So if the wipers are switched on, of course, that can cause some problems. Again, here's a rear wiper blade. Now this one you can see is actually frozen onto this is a Suburban. It's actually has a little pedestal that holds the wiper blade in place down at the bottom of the window, and this piece is actually frozen to the pedestal. So again, that's going to cause an issue. And here, the vehicle, this is kind of a bit of a worn out switch, but an example how I found the vehicle. The wipers are actually turned on even before the car was left overnight. So that again is something that's going to cause a problem.
So what sort of damage do you see from this?
On the simplest side, the easiest damage would be a ripped wiper blade, which is cheap and easy to fix. But more often it'll wreck wiper motors or cause linkage to either bend or break, or sometimes it's just the nut that holds the linkage to the wiper arm will be forced loose and just needs to be tightened and realigned. That's kind of the simplest scenario. But quite frequently we replace wiper motors, and it seems like a lot of rear ones we tend to replace them quite frequently. I think because people forget about the rear wiper. It's in the back, they don't think about it, and leave it on. It's frozen to the window and burns it up.
So what sort of cost are we talking about?
Well, wiper blades can be $10 a piece on the easy side of it. Readjusting linkage could be, $30 to $50. Once you start getting into the realm of motors, though, you're getting into several $100s, and could be, even into $1,000 on some cars. So, that's the kind of damage you definitely want to prevent.
$1,000. So besides making sure your switches are off, do you have any other recommendations for wiper longevity in winter?
Yeah, so absolutely. So not only make sure the switches are off, but the other key thing is when it's cold out, and this doesn't necessarily mean there's snow in the window, but if there's frost and it's frozen, make sure your wiper blades are not stuck to your window. This is another thing that happens. And it's simple. Just go around, grab each wiper blade, front and rear. If you have rear wiper blade, just grab it and make sure it physically moves off the window. And that'll prevent a lot of damage, because that's something we see a lot of too. Doesn't have to be snow. It can be, it can be ice. And one thing with snow, it's not such a big deal to use your wipers as a snow brush where you have dry, powdery snow, but a lot of the snow we get around Vancouver can be heavy and wet, and that can be really difficult for wipers to move. So you really want to brush off any thick accumulations. Half an inch is no big deal, but when you start getting into 3 or 4 inches, that's tough. So,
and of course, clearing the top of your car, Vancouver, which is almost like a rite of passage for people not to do,
Yeah.
have a foot of snow on top of their car,
Yeah.
which is extremely dangerous.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing too, and brushing off your hood as well, because a lot of times you get snow blowing up on your hood, and that creates blind spots, and often wipers get all kind of gummed up. And so having your window washers free as well is another tip I can give. When a lot of times washer nozzles are located on the hood, well, they're not going to do any good if they're buried under 3 inches of snow. So again, keep that area clear and clean, because it'll help you. See, keeps things safe and helps you get from one end of the journey to the other in one piece.
So there you go. If you need some service on your wipers in Vancouver, the guys to see are Pawlik Automotive. You can reach them at 604-327-7112 to book your appointment. You have to book ahead because they're busy, or check out the website, pawlikautomotive.com. Of course, the YouTube channel, Pawlik Auto Repair, hundreds of videos on there about all makes and models of cars and repairs. And of course, thank you so much for watching the podcast. We appreciate it. Thank you, Bernie.
Thanks, Mark.